Space exploration has had a purple patch this year. Unmanned missions have visited the moon's orbit and surface as scientists continue to push the boundaries of what was once considered unimaginable. Yet alongside these successes, we've witnessed tragic accidents, as well as raising fresh concerns about the safety of human space exploration. Join us as we explore the craziest rocket launches that exploded this year and the new safety measures that have been introduced to prevent future mishaps. Safety has always been a major concern in the space industry, especially since the unfortunate Columbia disaster in 2003 that left 7 astronauts dead and ultimately marked the beginning of the end for the space shuttle program. Since then, we've enjoyed a period of safety with fewer tragic accidents. In fact, since the Columbia disaster, we haven't had any accidents leading to the loss of human lives. However, we've had a series of space accidents and rocket explosions. The latest of them occurred earlier this year on the 20th of April 2023. Although no life was lost to this crash, it caused a lot of stir in the media space. But what exactly happened on this said day? At exactly 8:33 a.m. CT time, the Starship rocket took off from the Starbase spaceport on the southern tip of Texas along the Gulf Coast. Initially, the plan for this mission was for the 394-foot rocket to make an iconic 90-minute debut, sojourning into the region just outside the Earth orbit before returning into the atmosphere to crash in the Pacific Ocean near Hawaii. At 394 feet tall, the Starship is a gigantic and terrific machine capable of producing 16.7 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. As the 33 Super Heavy Raptor engines came alive, the rocket powered its way through the morning sky to the delight of the crowd that gathered around the launch pad and watched the live stream on SpaceX's YouTube channel. For Elon Musk, SpaceX employees, and space enthusiasts all over the world, this was an unprecedented moment. They clapped and cheered as the rocket continued its journey, traveling at a maximum speed of 1,400 miles per hour and reaching a maximum altitude of 39 kilometers, the highest ever attained by a Starship rocket. But unfortunately, this launch and the celebrations that came with it were short-lived, as tragedy struck less than 4 minutes into the mission. It all started when the upper stage of the rocket failed to separate from the lower stage. Within a few seconds, the entire structure tumbled out of control and eventually went up in flames. This tragic fiery blast marked the end of what would have been an extraordinary debut for the Starship rocket. In addition, it left behind an enormous magnitude of damage both in the air and on the ground. For starters, the launch pad was completely disintegrated, with massive chunks of concrete and reinforced steel shattering all over the launch site. Several buildings were left shaken, and at least one window was shattered. Officials of the Fish and Wildlife Service confirmed that following this crash, the wind around the region became heavily contaminated with a plume cloud of pulverized concrete as tons of debris rained freely in Resident Me and buildings within the state park, and even as far as Port Isabel, a city located about 6 miles from Boca Chica. Consequently, grass fire engulfed up to 3 acres of state park land. Early analysis of the incident and footage of the crash suggest that some of the 33 Raptor engines may have malfunctioned during the launch, causing the rocket to explode. Interestingly, the Starship didn't explode by itself. Instead, engineers hit the self-destruct button after discovering that the rocket had lost control. To be fair to SpaceX, the launch pad and its immediate surroundings were well barricaded, shielding spectators from the tons of debris that resulted from the crash, and thankfully no lives were lost. However, the incident triggered a new sense of worry, particularly among people who had been heavily critical of the company's fast-paced development approach. Many took to X and other social media platforms to express their worry and overall dissatisfaction in SpaceX and its processes, especially when it comes to safety. So, how did the public react to this crash? Perhaps expectedly, the immediate response to this explosion was fierce. One user on X ripped into the space company, saying that the launch was rushed and careless. Sharon Almaguer, a resident of Port Isabel, described the explosion as terrifying. She admitted that Boca Chica had endured several rumblings in the past from SpaceX launches, but this one was on a completely different level. Elon Musk didn't seem too bothered by these concerns though. Reacting to the crash in X, the American billionaire congratulated the SpaceX team on an exciting test launch, adding that the company had learned a lot for the next test launch in a few months. NASA Chief Bill Nelson also chipped in with some words of encouragement for the company, saying, "Every great achievement throughout history has demanded some level of calculated risk, because with great risk comes great reward." SpaceX seemed to toe the same line. The American aerospace company described the launch as incredible, adding that the primary aim of the launch was to collect data for subsequent flights. And despite the explosion, the SpaceX team claimed that this goal was achieved. With a test like this, success comes from what we learn, and today's test helped us improve Starship's reliability as SpaceX seeks to make life multiplanetary. Similarly, some public commentators like famous Time magazine writer Jeffrey Kluger played down the significance of the explosion, saying, "It's no big deal." But to the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, it indeed was a big deal. The agency launched an extensive investigation into the crash in an attempt to find out what went wrong as part of the procedure after all the failed rocket launches. The entire Starship rocket was grounded with immediate effect. In a report published in September, SpaceX confirmed that a leaking propellant from the Super Heavy booster was responsible for the failure that resulted in the explosion. Following an extensive investigation into the mishap, the FAA recommended 63 correcting actions to be taken by the aerospace company to prevent a reoccurrence. Some of these actions include redesigns of vehicle hardware and the launch pad, and additional analysis of testing and safety-critical systems and other components. So, which other space crashes have we experienced this year? Beyond the Starship explosion, the tragic demise of Russia's Luna 25 probe was another disaster that rocked the space industry to its core. The unmanned space exploration device was headed for the south pole of the Moon, a region that reportedly contains water ice and precious elements. This was Russia's first mission to the Moon since August 18, 1976. But a few hours into the journey, Roscosmos officials suddenly lost communication with the Luna 25 probe due to an abnormal situation, and eventually on the 20th of August 2023, it was officially confirmed that the lunar probe had crashed into the Moon after drifting into an uncontrolled orbit. The apparatus moved into an unpredictable orbit and ceased to exist as a result of a collision with the surface of the Moon, a statement by Roscosmos read. Had the mission been successful, the Luna 25 would have been the first space probe to visit the lunar South Pole. But ultimately, that record is held today by India's Chandrayaan-3 spacecraft after it touched down on the lunar surface on August 23, 2023. Since the unfortunate explosion in April, SpaceX has had several successful rocket launches, including the SES-03B mPOWER mission, which launched on the 12th of November 2023. It was the 84th successful rocket launch by SpaceX this year alone. With the exception of the Starship failed launch, SpaceX has had a 100% success rate when it comes to rocket launches. And going by this reputation, there's a good chance that the next Starship launch will be a resounding success. So, when exactly will the Starship rocket take to the skies again? While SpaceX is keen to avoid a reoccurrence of the explosion, the aerospace company has continued to work towards launching the second Starship test flight. As part of the recommendations made by the FAA, SpaceX has redesigned its launch pad in Boca Chica to include a metal plate diverter and a new water deluge system to diffuse the enormous heat and force generated by the Starship launch vehicle. Following multiple successful pressure tests of this revolutionary system in July, the company has been waiting to get the green light from the government to proceed. And after months of reviews, the US Federal Aviation Administration granted SpaceX the license to launch the mega rocket again. At the time of drafting this video, the countdown to the second Starship space flight test has begun, and if everything goes as planned, the rocket is expected to hit the skies again in a few days from now. What's your opinion about the safety of human space exploration? And do you think SpaceX is currently doing enough to prevent failed rocket launches like the one we saw during the first Starship test flight? Leave your comments down below.